1957. And since then, we have gradually shifted our system of education from one which was English medium to that of a Malay medium education system. And so over the years, English has become, well, we like to claim that English is a second language in Malaysia, but this isn't actually very accurate. It really depends on which part of the country you're in. In some places in the country, English is very much a foreign language. And our education system, which is in place right now, is a system which we have inherited from the British education system, which was in place before we gained independence. So what we see in Malaysia are children choosing between various options of education while they are in primary school. They can choose to enter schools where Malay is the medium of instruction, or they can choose schools where Mandarin or the Tamil language is the medium of instruction. So Tamil, as you probably know, is an Indian language. There is a large Tamil community here in Malaysia. So children, by choice, given the option of selecting a Malay medium, a Chinese medium, or a Tamil medium school. So in all these schools, English is taught as a subject. So all other subjects in the school are taught either in Malay, Chinese, Mandarin, or Tamil, and then English is added as an additional subject in these schools. But while we have moved from English to Malay or Chinese or Tamil as the medium of instruction in schools, there's always been a great deal of emphasis on the English language. There is always a comparison to where we are now in terms of our proficiency in English to the times when many of our schools were English medium schools. And there is a desire among some quarters at least that our students today are as proficient in English as they were, decades ago when English was the medium of instruction. And as you can imagine, in a multi-racial country like Malaysia, language policies are always politicized, and there are always discussions going on about the role of English in Malaysia. Sometimes the narratives appear to suggest that the survival of one language necessarily leads to the death of another. And so this gets played out in the political sphere, and that crosses over into the education sphere. And there's always this struggle. But all through, even now, we are looking at a great deal of emphasis on the need to ensure that our students are proficient in the English language. So since 2013, we have been guided by the Malaysia Education Blueprint, which is a document which paves the way for reforms in education as a whole. But within this reform agenda is a specific emphasis on the teaching of English and Malay in our schools. So the idea is to ensure that our students are just as proficient in both languages. And as a spin-off from the Malaysia Education Blueprint is yet another policy document which focuses on reforms in English language education in Malaysia. Now, the significant change in our reform process is our focus on the Common European Framework of Reference, or CEFR, as a guide to reforming English language education in Malaysia. Unfortunately, with the reform process, there's been a lot of finger pointing in discussions about where we have gone wrong with English language education over several decades. And teachers have been at the receiving end of the blame. There's been a lot of criticism suggesting that our English language teachers are not...
Sorry for interruption. Mr. Nair, are you sharing the slide?
I am, yes.
But it is not shared. Could you
Sorry.
stop it and share once again, please?
Okay. All right. Are you able to see my screen now?
Yeah, now I can see it.
All right, great.
Please
Okay.
go ahead.
I apologize for that, but you didn't miss much. But as I was saying, during well, over the last 5 years or so, there's been a lot of questions about. I'm just wondering whether I can get rid of this in the middle here. Okay.
Please go ahead. Yeah, we did that.
Right. So, as I said, there's been a lot of criticism on the performance of English language teachers in Malaysia. And this has resulted in changes in the way continuing professional development programs are being offered here in Malaysia for teachers. And often we find that teachers are at the receiving end of instructions and guidance, right? And I'm going to come to this point later in my presentation. What we've seen with the COVID pandemic is, I'm sure as it has happened in your countries as well, our schools were shut down for a couple of months at least. Our schools are now open again and students have now returned to schools. But during the shutdown, there have been a lot of challenges that we face, not unlike what Richmond and as well as Supong have shared. Teachers had to quickly adapt to an online platform, but this was easier said than done. More often than not, teachers relied on mobile devices such as WhatsApp to communicate with students. And as a result, there have been innovations as well. You know, teachers have been able to make use of the tools that were available and communicate with students. This hasn't always been smooth. We have had challenges because you have students in very rural parts of Malaysia without sufficient Wi-Fi access, and these students have unfortunately been at a loss, at least for the couple of months when the schools were closed. And this is probably why there was a pressing need to reopen our schools. Right now, Malaysia has been fairly successful in curtailing the spread of the COVID virus, but it's still there. The government is monitoring the situation very closely, but for now at least our schools are open. However, certain decisions have been made. For example, the cancellation of some popular summative exams which take place at the end of primary school education, as well as midway through secondary school education. Although it was the COVID pandemic which pushed for the cancellation of these assessments, there has been also narratives and discussions around the cancellation of these exams, and people are now questioning the need for these exams at all, you know, and what purpose these exams serve. So the COVID pandemic has actually created some healthy discussions and invited us to re-examine some of our focus on assessments. In the past, we have been, I think our education system has reflected quite a great deal of obsession with assessments. And the COVID pandemic has allowed us now to review and revise and refocus our attention on formative assessments rather than summative assessments. Now, I'd like to also briefly talk about how the COVID pandemic has shifted our focus in terms of continuing professional development for teachers. As Richmond highlighted just now, the JALT conference, which typically takes place at the end of the year, has moved to an online platform. The conference in Malaysia usually runs mid-year. And what we had to do was to make the difficult decision of canceling our conference simply because we could not carry out the conference in a public venue. But what we have observed in MELTA at least is that our members and our teachers have taken the lead in finding alternative platforms for continuing professional development. So we found that our members, the younger ones especially, have turned to online platforms to run seminars and webinars, which have been to their credit. And so the knowledge sharing process has actually been richer because of the COVID pandemic in some ways, to be honest. As I said just now, in the past, teachers have always been at the receiving end of instructions about what needs to be done and what needs to take place in the classroom. But because of the COVID situation, teachers have had the opportunity to lead discussions and to suggest ways in which teaching could be more effective through online platforms. And this is something that we are looking at in a positive light. So as Richmond has also described about how JALT is moving forward, MELTA is also moving forward with online platforms. We are running a conference in November, for example, and which is going to be online. It's a unique event which looks at teachers as well as academics and student teachers competing for awards in English language education. So this is something that you may want to look at. Those of you in Nepal, we would welcome your participation in this event. And so in terms of pushing ahead with reforms, I think what we have seen happen because of the COVID pandemic is we're still moving ahead with reforms in our CFR aligned curriculum, but we are rescheduling our deliverables. Some delays have obviously happened. For example, in our selection of textbooks for next year, there have been some delays, but we're now desperately trying to move back, to come back on track. We have adapted to an online mode, but I think I'd like to reiterate a point that Supong as well as Richmond have made. It's not just a matter of adapting what we already have to an online platform. That's going to be difficult. We really need pedagogy and assessment practices to change with the online platform. And I think that is something that we are struggling with here in Malaysia. In universities, for example, we have moved to an online platform, but our assessments are still very traditional. So there is a need for us to align our pedagogy as well as assessment practices to the online mode. And finally, as I said just now, I think what the COVID pandemic has done is that it has allowed teachers to present themselves as generators of knowledge as they share information through online webinars, rather than merely be at the receiving end of instructions and guidelines. So that is something which has been positive in that sense.
Sorry for interruption. Sorry for interruption, Dr. Nair. You have now 5 minutes.
That's okay. I'm actually done with my presentation. Thank you. I will now, I hope you can use the extra 5 minutes for Q&As.
Okay, thank you.